Okay, so good morning everybody, and welcome to Kagyu Samizon for the third session in the series of the Reign of Wisdom. So before we start, let's just place our minds in a good, calm and receptive place by reciting the lineage prayers. First of all, the prayer to the Root Lama, and then the Vajradhara or Kagyu Lineage prayer. O glorious, precious Root Lama, above my head on a lotus moon seat, you care for me with great kindness. Please bestow the siddhis of body, speech and mind. Great Vajradhara Tilopa Naropa Marpa Mila Dharma Lord Gampopa, knower of the 3 times omniscient Karmapa, holders of the 4 elder and 8 younger lineages, Rikuntaklung and the Salpa, glorious Drukpa, and so forth, masters of the profound path of Mahamudra, to the Dagpo instruction lineage, the pillars protectors of wanderers. Kagyu Lamas, I supplicate you, I uphold your lineage. Grant the blessings of your liberating lives. Just as revulsion is taught to be the legs of meditation, this meditator clings not to food and riches, and has severed the ties to worldly life. Grant your blessings for detachment from honor and gain. Just as devotion is taught to be the head of meditation, this meditator constantly prays to the Lama, who opens the vault of pith instructions. Grant your blessings for uncontrived devotion to wellful. Just as non-distraction is taught to be the body of meditation, this meditator simply remains without altering the fresh essence of whatever thought arises. Grant your blessings for parting from the concept of meditation. Just as thought is taught to be in essence Dharmakaya, for this meditator unhindered manifestation dawns. Nothing whatsoever dawning as whatever may appear. Grant your blessings to realize inseparable samsara nirvana. May I never in future lives part from authentic lamas, and embracing ever the glory of Dharma. May I perfect the qualities of the levels and paths, and the swiftly attain the state of Vajradhara. So before we put our prayers away, If you look at the first verse of the lineage prayer, it says, Great Vajradhara, that's Dorji Chang, the primordial Buddha, and then we have Tilo, Naro, and Marpa, the very people who we're going to be studying today. So Tilo is short for Tilopa, Naropa, and Marpa. So usually we just study the songs of one person at a time, but I think it's really useful in this instance because right here you see they're at the beginning because they are at the beginning of the Kagyu lineage. And what the Rain of Wisdom is the songs of liberation from all the various masters of the Kagyu lineage. So we're starting here at the beginning. So both Tilopa and Naropa were the Indian Mahasiddhas. Marpa is known as Marpa the translator because he's Tibetan and he went to India to receive the teachings primarily from Naropa, but Naropa was the student of Tilopa. So when we say the Kagyu lineage, this is who we're talking about. So now we're going to look at the actual, those people in that order. So, we start with the illustrious Tilopa. So, as I said, Tilopa was an Indian Mahasiddha. Mahasiddha means an enlightened master. He was born into a royal family, so he was an aristocratic. But he gave up all of that, all of his worldly goods, similarly to the Buddha in a way, and went in search of liberation. So we're going to join him at the point where he's going to look for the Great Master Nagarjuna, another Indian Mahasiddha. I should explain that Tilopa was extremely, to our eyes, or to normal eyes, unconventional to say the least. So there's good reasons behind that. He's not just being unconventional for the sake of it. But we're going to read some of the narrative before we get to the song. His song from here, this is actually quite short, but it's important to have some understanding of who he was and what point in his life. And I can talk a bit about that as we go through the narrative. So I'm just going to read the narrative. One page, 126. So we're joining him at a point where he's already highly realized, but not 100%. I mean, it goes in levels, and he's to us he would be like already extremely realized. So, but he still wanted to perfect his realization even more. And so the teachers that he'd been studying with let him go because he wanted to go and look for Acharya Nagarjuna, this great teacher who was in a different region. He was in the south of India. So in the south, now there was a great charnel ground. A charnel ground is kind of like you could say in our terms, a cemetery, but not a nice manicured sort of cemetery. It was a place where bodies were burnt, where death was not, now death in our civilization is quite sanitized and you don't really come into contact with it, not on a kind of visceral scale anyway. But the charnel grounds were at very different places. They were the name of it was called Terrifying Laughter. So that will give you a clue as to what it might have been like. Terrifying Laughter. So in this charnel ground, there was a shrine of the god Maheswara, where many Buddhists and non-Buddhist dakinis assembled by turns on their holy days. So the dakinis, there are different levels of dakinis. They're kandros. So my name is Rinchen Kandro, so I'm some sort of level of dakini. Well, probably quite an earthly one, but there are also sky-going ones. Some of them are quite mischievous. I probably belong to that group. But so they are the kind of holders of the teachings or the protectors of the teachings, but they do different things. I just have that name as an aspirational name. So anyway, while they were preparing a Gana Chakra, that's kind of sacred feast, Tilopa visited the Acharya Matangi, who practiced yogic discipline and lived in a grass hut. So this teacher, he was Acharya, so that means a teacher, Matangi. He was a yogi. So you know that a bit like he would, I think, in looks look something like an Indian sadhu. So probably not much in the way of clothing. Maybe just one short robe or something like that, or kind of like a loincloth. And he lived in a grass hut. So these people, they were very, very simple in their life. They were not interested in comfort and worldly stuff. So Tilopa, remember, he was looking for the teacher Nagarjuna. So he found this teacher Matangi, and he knew that he was practicing the yogic discipline, so there was a good chance he might know something about where Nagarjuna was. And he asked him, "Do you know of the guru Nagarjuna?" So Matangi, without hesitation, replied, "The guru has gone to expound the Dharma to the king of the Gandharvas." Gandharvas are not humans, but anyway, they're a different kind of set being. So anyway, Nagarjuna had gone to explain the Dharma to the king of the Gandharvas. However, he sent me to accept you, i.e. Tilopa, a noble person, as my student. So we don't really know much about Matangi, but he's maybe not a noble, but Tilopa was a noble. Anyway, without hesitation, Tilopa offered him a mandala and took him as his guru, without any kind of hesitation. So at that time, Matangi performed the Abhisheka of Sri Guya Samaja and gave him oral instructions. So it means an empowerment of this particular practice. And he gave him the instructions as well. The suchness of mind is like this. So meditate constantly on suchness without wandering. And with that, Tilopa's family arrogance was broken. So any traces of being proud, of being kind of slightly arrogant because he was from royal family, was broken. He'd already accepted these teachings and the empowerment from somebody who, in worldly terms, was a kind of more inferior level, you could say. So with that, it had completely broken any trace of arrogance resulting from his high birth. Then Matangi gave him permission to enter the action in order to actualize the path realization. So this phrase, enter the action, it's something that basically it means when you've reached a very high level of realization, you're then encouraged to enter the action. It means to apply it, but not just apply it in a loose way, but really go into kind of situations where it would be difficult. So you knowingly go into difficult situations to see if you're as high level as you think you might be. So it's a testing situation. You voluntarily put yourselves, this is for very high beings, don't start doing any of this. So one of the things is you can maybe go to a marketplace and act in a really crazy manner, or you might even steal something, or you might act in what would appear to be a crazy manner to ordinary eyes. So you're really kind of challenging yourself to see if you have applied the realization and under any circumstances. So this is very, very high practice, but to ordinary eyes it looks a bit crazy. So Matangi said to him, "You are a noble person. You should go on a distant journey eastward from here, go to the region of Bengal." So he went to Bengal. So he said that there is a great city called Harikila in Sahor. These are places in Bengal. So that country was once blessed by an incarnate king called Raja Udmakemara. There, accomplishment is naturally facilitated, and so one travels the path quickly. So it must have been quite a sacred place, blessed by the presence of that king. So these are still Matangi giving him instructions. In the midst of that city is a marketplace called Panchapana, rich in the delights of the five senses. So in other words, it's a really good marketplace. It's got every kind of worldly delight you might be able to wish for. So quite a tempting place if you're trying not to be tempted by the senses. So he's putting him in this environment. Then he says, so there is a prostitute called Darima, who has many servants and followers. You should serve her and train yourself in path realization. In no time at all, you will attain the supreme siddhi of Mahamudra, and you will liberate many beings. Thus he prophesied. So in other words, he's asking to do what in the eyes of most people would be completely contrary. You would not say that to somebody like a priest or somebody who was a kind of theologian or something like. You wouldn't say, go and serve a prostitute, would you? But this is why we have to have this understanding that these are not ordinary beings. These are beings at a very high level. And as I said before, this is the way that they can test their realization, by applying it even in the most, to us, crazy circumstances or difficult circumstances or tempting circumstances. So this is what they do. So, but very few people do this. It's like very, very high level. And it's not for everybody. This is the tantric path of perfecting the wisdom. So it's not for everybody. So, Tilopa, the Lord of Yogins, practiced according to his Guru's command. So by night, he assisted the prostitute by escorting men in and out. And then in the daytime, he did the work of beating sesame seeds. So he was beating sesame seeds to get the oil. So he had a day job and he had a night job. And in this way, he had the realization of suchness, of things as they are, absolutely as they are, not distorted by any kind of wrong view. He came to understand. He was fully realized. You could say Buddhahood, it's the same thing. When he had attained the supreme siddhi of Mahamudra, the people of that city saw him in various different ways. So when they looked at him, they saw he was not just an ordinary being. Some of them saw a blazing bonfire surrounded by 14 lamps. Some saw a bhikkhu, that's a monk, sitting in meditation in the midst of a mass of light. Others saw a yogi adorned with charnel ground ornaments, bone ornaments. This is how they used to dress, with sort of bones and bone necklaces and things, and with many girls circumambulating and prostrating to him. So this was when he had attained full enlightenment, different people saw him in these different strange ways, but all of them kind of very remarkable. So the people went and they told Darima that this prostitute, you know, this is what we see Tilopa to be like. So she saw Tilopa in the sky in front of her. So she ceased to see him as she'd seen him before, as just somebody bringing people in and out, but saw him sitting as a king in the sky in front of her, reveling in the midst of a massive light. And with his right hand, he was dropping a pestle, crushing sesame seeds. Darima could hardly believe her eyes. She repented and was tormented because she had looked upon him as her servant, and now she saw him in a completely different light. So she prostrated to him, she circumambulated, and she prepared a mandala for him. Then she went to him and received his feet on the top of her head and supplicated, "Oh, Jetson, oh, great one, please forgive the evil deeds that I accumulated, not recognizing you as a Siddha, as a great master. From today on, please accept me. Please accept me as your student, as your pupil, your disciple." Tilopa the yogin said, "Since you did not know me as a holy person when you gave me work, there is no fault. And by means of this work, I practice the path." You see? What we would consider as the most lowly sort of menial work, by means of that, he practiced the path and he attained enlightenment. Now, this co-emergent wisdom, the innate, unborn nature of all dharmas, has arisen in my being. So this other phrase, co-emergent wisdom, one will hear this several times perhaps, or in different situations, but it's difficult to understand. But what it means, co-emergent, the two things are co-emergent. It means two things being both samsara and nirvana. Samsara being worldly life and suffering, nirvana being the opposite of that, the ceasing of suffering. You could say almost like, or definitely the ceasing of without suffering. So how can these two things be the same? Well, that's in the realization that you see them as the co-emergent. They merge together, and when you have the right view, when you are fully enlightened, they become inseparable because the one signifies the other in a way. It's very difficult for us to understand, but in the same way that to our eyes what he was doing, you could say was wrong or sinful even, some people would say, whereas in actual fact, it was by means of serving the prostitute and by beating sesame seeds that he attained realization. So in other words, things ain't what they seem to be. So, and in our worldly eyes, we don't see things as they truly are. So we shouldn't judge a book by looking at the cover in other words, because we don't always understand. Sometimes it's a best of 50-50 chance, until we become highly realized. So don't be quick to judge what you think might be right or wrong. So, because of this co-emergent wisdom, the innate, unborn nature of all dharmas has arisen in my being. The innate, unborn, the truth of how things are, which has been that way, and now has arisen for me in my being. May this enter into your heart too, Darima, because he accepted her as his pupil, as his disciple. And so saying that, he merely placed a flower on the crown of her head, and at that very moment she was liberated. Now she was also had that potential that was very suddenly realized, but he probably knew that all along. So anyway, at that moment she was liberated because she had such faith in him. From seeing him as as just her servant, and suddenly seeing him for who he was, she already had great vision. And she felt tormented until he said, look, it wasn't your fault, and this is why. And so she was liberated and obtained the vision of the path of blessing. So she wasn't fully liberated, but she was well on the way, and she became a yogini. So from that point on. Now, at that point, the king of that area heard that Darima had been liberated. It sounded like she was quite a sort of well-known prostitute quite in the hierarchy. So maybe, who knows, the king might have already known her very well. It doesn't say that, I'm just simply... I'm sorry, king. Maybe that's not true. I don't know. That's what not to be judgmental. So anyway, the king heard that Darima had been liberated by an incarnate yogin. So he wanted to find out what's going on here. So he got on his elephant and he rode and he went to see what was going on. And he had a large retinue of people with him because he was a king. So both the yogin, i.e. Tilopa, and Darima were sitting at the crossroads of the marketplace, having risen into the sky to the height of 7 plantain trees. Exactly. So 7 plantain trees, they're sitting together in the sky. So Tilopa then sang in this Vajradoha, which we're going to be looking at, in the resonant and harmonious voice of Mahabrahma. That's beyond me. I don't know what that would have been like, and even if I had known, I doubt whether I could try and do it, but I will read it. So now we're going to hear the song that Tilopa sang. Not only to the king, but to everybody that was there, the retinue and the people of the area. So he sang, "Sesame oil is the essence. Although the ignorant know that it is the sesame seed, in the sesame seed, they do not understand the way of cause, effect, and becoming, and therefore are not able to extract the essence, the sesame oil. Although innate co-emergent wisdom abides in the heart of all beings, if it is not shown by the guru, it cannot be realized." So remember, co-emergent wisdom, samsara, nirvana, inseparable, seeming opposites, but inseparable. If it's not shown by the guru, it cannot be realized. Just like the sesame oil that remains in the seed, it does not appear. One removes the husk by beating the sesame, and the sesame oil, the essence, appears. So that's how you get the oil. In the same way, the guru shows the truth of Tathata. Tathata is the sacred view, the unobscured sacred view. In the same way, the guru shows the truth of Tathata, and all phenomena become indivisible in one essence. Kyeho, Kyeho. The far-reaching, unfathomable meaning is apparent at this very moment. Oh, how wondrous! So he's using the sesame seed and the beating of the sesame seed as a metaphor for realization. Now, usually when I read through a song, I then will go through it again and try to delve into it a bit more. But luckily I don't have to, because the next bit of the narrative is Tilopa doing that very thing. So I won't have my poor effort, because we've got the master to explain it. So he says, thus, in absolute truth. Okay, first of all, I'll just pause here, because in absolute truth, We talk about two different truths, the absolute truth and relative truth. So absolute truth is there's nothing beyond absolute, it's absolute. But we don't easily understand that because we live in a very relative world. So we have to approach the absolute truth through understanding the relative truth. If we even understand the relative truth, we're doing well. But to get to the absolute truth, you need to understand the relative truth. Thus, in absolute truth, there is no path to be practiced, no difference between what is to be abandoned and the antidote, and nothing abandoned or realized in fruition. It's like there's nothing to do. And yet, there is. Because in absolute truth, there isn't, because in absolute truth, you're already there. There's nothing left to do. And there never really was anything to do. It's just that you see how it is. If I put a very poor metaphor, imagine that we're sitting here in the dark and we can't see a thing. And then, so we have no idea what it's like in here because it's dark. And then, by some miracle, the light comes on and we see everything. But we haven't done anything because it was always like that. I think it's something a little bit like that. Okay. So, however, in relative truth, all dharmas depend on cause and effect. We are in this relative world, and so everything that we do and everything that we see depends on cause and effect. And for us to attain something worthwhile, we have to watch our behavior, we have to behave in a good way, our conduct, because that will affect the results and our subsequent karma. So we are moving in this world of relative truth in order to get beyond it. But while we're in it, we have to move in it accordingly. We can't just, well, now that we know that how realization is, because we've read about it, but we're not realized, are we? So we can say that. We can have it as our lines to say at the end, repeat this 100 times. It's not going to get us there. We don't understand it. We sort of understand the words, but we don't get the meaning because we're not there. Just as if we don't know what it's like to be anything other than we are. We can imagine a little bit here and there, but we don't know. So we have to work with what we have and what we understand. And what we understand or start to understand is the relative truth. So therefore we have the four foundations: precious human life, death and impermanence, karma, cause and effect, the illusory nature of worldly life. So all of these things lead up to this. We're at that level. We're at the foundation level. This is at the highest level, so we won't understand all of it, but we get some sort of glimpse of where we're headed, maybe. In a way, although we've started at the beginning with the first sort of recognized master of the Kagyu lineage, we're sort of starting with the highest possible level. So don't worry if you don't understand all of it at once, and even if whatever you do understand will be mainly on a kind of abstract level rather than a full understanding. So, he says, in relative truth, all dharmas depend on cause and effect. This is illustrated by the example of sesame seed and sesame oil. If by the combination of mortar and pestle, sort of a bit like this, and a person's hands beating and extracting are not done, one cannot obtain the oil. You might have a mortar and pestle, but if you're not using it, It ain't going to happen. If you ask why, it's because everything is produced not by one cause and not by one condition, but rather through the collective force of coincidence. And I'm pronouncing it coincidence rather than coincidence, because coincidence sounds a bit accidental. Coincidence, you get more of an idea of many things coming together, not accidentally. In the same way, although the Dharmakaya pervades all beings, although Buddha nature pervades all beings, so if we were a sesame seed, we would have the oil of Buddha nature in us, but it's not apparent. If the Guru does not show it, and the path realization is not practiced, the fruition is not accomplished or actualized. So we have the potential, we have that seed with the essence locked in it, but unless the Guru shows us the way, and we practice that way, it's not enough even for the Guru to show us or tell us or say this is what you should do. Then you have to do it, you have to practice it. So all of these things have to come together. Otherwise the fruition doesn't happen. Therefore, since in relative truth all dharmas depend on the coincidence of cause and effect, the realization that actualizes the wisdom of suchness has been expressed in terms of beating sesame seeds. That much we can probably understand, isn't it? We know how to get the oil out of the sesame seed. So we have to kind of apply that metaphor to ourselves. So we have the potential to be Buddha, to be fully realized. We have that seed, we have that essence. But unless we have instruction from the Guru, and unless we practice that, it won't be realized. It would be very unrealistic to expect that to be realized any more than I could have this full of sesame seeds and just look at it, oh, there's still no oil coming out. You know, it would be the equivalent of that. You might have the mortar and pestle, you might have the seeds, but unless you put the work in, nothing happens. So thank you, Tilopa, for that wonderful teaching. And at that time, by just hearing the sound of this sacred view, the Tathata of Tilopa, all the people assembled there were liberated from the bondage of their kleshas, of their wrong views, their obscurations. And they saw the wisdom of suchness and attained the siddhi of the celestial realm. At that time, the country of Sahor was emptied. Thus it is famed. When it says the country was emptied, it means emptied of samsaric misunderstandings. So in other words, all the people there gained some realization. They were, yeah, that's what it says. So, that's Tilopa. That's just one song by Tilopa. And it's relatively simply expressed. There's not many words in it that you won't understand, you know. And it's his mastery that he uses something so simple, like pounding sesame seeds, that anyone can relate to that, you know. And then you just have to turn it inwards and do it, of course. I mean, it's very, very fortunate that we have not only that song, but Tilopa's explanation, you know. So although it's not a long song, it's right there, isn't it? Of course, it's at an extremely high level, but it gives us some idea of where we're at and what we have to do. So everything that he did was like that. every aspect of his life. When we first started looking at it, we think, what is this guy doing? You know, he's working for a prostitute, he's beating sesame seeds, what's that all about? But look what he did with that. Look what he showed but through that. So, probably his most illustrious disciple was Naropa. Now we're actually going to be studying the Song of Marpa, who was Naropa's student or disciple, but we will get to something by Naropa as well. But first, the next thing we're going to look at is Marpa. There's a chapter called The Grand Songs of Marpa, and there are quite a lot of them. But and I've just picked out one, but before we get to that, there's a sort of an introduction, and it doesn't say who it's by, but I would make a calculated guess that it's probably by Mikyo Dorji, because the 8th Karmapa, because Mikyo Dorji, he was the one we went to first because he was the compiler of, no, second rather, we did, anyway, it doesn't matter, but we went to him early because he was the first compiler of these songs. After he died, other people compiled more of the songs, but he was the 8th Karmapa and he compiled, so I think this homage is by him. Namo Gurave. From innate simplicity, the Dharmakaya, arises luminosity beyond coming and going. Through great compassion for the welfare of others, he manifests as the Sambhogakaya. To this one who tames disciples of the 10th Bhumi, the 6th Sugata Vajradhara, to the collector of Vajradhara's teachings, the Lord of Secret, Vajrapani, to the Jetsun Dakini, Sumati, who gave her blessings to the Nirmanakaya, renowned as Tilopa, to the Lord of Yogin's heart son, Naropa, who endured many trials, and who is master of knowing the ornament of Jambudvipa, which is a name for India, to the translator Marpa Lotsawa, who paid homage at the dust of Naropa's lotus feet, to the great Repa, that's Milarepa, father and son and many others, to all these Kagyus I respectfully prostrate. I bow down at the feet of Marpa of Lodrak, the Lord of Dharma who protects beings by the kingdom of Vajrayana. So he's paying homage to the Kagyu lineage, to the whole of the Kagyu lineage. I'm not going to go into that in great detail, but that's what that is. He's paying homage, and he names them, up to Marpa, because Marpa is the song that is one of his songs that we're going to be looking at. So again, I think it's important to read, before we get to the actual song, a little bit of the background narrative, so we get some idea of where it was and how it was. So Marpa was from Tibet. He traveled several times to India to take the teachings, and his principal teachers were from the great Naropa, who was the disciple of Tilopa, his primary student. Of course, he had many students, but Naropa was the preeminent one, you could say. And he also Marpa studied a lot with Maitripa and I think others as well, but those are the two main ones, especially Naropa. So here we join him where he's saying, Lord Marpa supplicated Naropa, glorious Naropa, and he asked him, he said, he didn't mince his words, Marpa, he was quite sort of, he didn't mince his words, we'll leave it at that. I want the Abhishek of Chakrasambhara and instructions on the commentary to the Tantra. I want this empowerment. probably put it not quite as boldly as that, but that's what it says here, so that's what I'm saying. I want the empowerment of chakra sambhara, this particular practice. And the instructions on the commentary to that tantra, it's a tantric practice, and he wants that empowerment and the instructions. So Naropa gave him the full empowerment, as well as the reading transmission and the instructions on the commentary to that tantra. And he said, practicing them is of great importance. There's no point in having it if you don't practice it. So now you've had it, you've had the three main things, the instruction, the empowerment, the instruction, and the reading transmission. So you've had all of that, now it's up to you. You practice it. Having been given the renowned oral instructions of the 4 special transmissions, the 6 dharmas of Naropa, and the Mahamudra transmission, showing the mind as innate co-emergent wisdom, Marpa meditated. In general, many special experiences and realizations of the unsurpassable secret mantra were born in his mind. In particular, while practicing Chandali, that's the practice of internal heat, Tumo, he actualized the unity of bliss, luminosity, and non-thought. For 7 days, he was unable to move the gates of his body, speech, and mind. He was sitting completely absorbed. And he established confidence in this. The 10 signs arose, and in a joyful state of mind, the days and nights passed. So he was completely in a state of enlightened bliss, you could say. And just sat there for 7 whole days. Later, Marpa thought to himself, I have spent about 12 years in Nepal and India. Not only have I received empowerments and oral instructions, I have also studied and practiced both their words and their meaning. Therefore, I have no regrets, and I do not have to emulate others' explications and meditations. And I don't have to be copying other people. I've done it myself. Now that my gold is almost spent, I will return to Tibet for a little while and obtain as much gold as I can, and then I will return to India. I'll come back to India and please my gurus by offering it to them. I will review thoroughly with them the teachings I've previously obtained, so I'll go over everything that I've already obtained, and then I will obtain whatever I did not receive before. So whatever's left, I'll come back for. Now, in general, I must by all means spread the teachings of the Buddha in Tibet. So what's the point of him having all these teachings if he doesn't spread them? So that's his reason for doing this. It's not just for himself. And in particular, the teachings of the practice lineage. Practice lineage is another way of saying the Kagyu lineage. So we're at the this is why it's so important, this key period, because it's just the beginnings of where it gets passed from the Indian Mahasiddhas to Marpa and to Tibet and ultimately to here, to everywhere. So he then assembled the necessary provisions using the rest of the remainder of his gold, keeping just enough for his expenses on the road. So, having summoned Brahman Sukhamati, Yogini Sukadari, and others, Marpa offered a Ganachakra, a sacred feast of thanksgiving and celebration to the Mahapandita Naropa. So they had a great feast. At the feast, he thought to himself, fulfilling my purpose in coming to India from Tibet, I have met many gurus who are learned and who have attained siddhi, great powers. I have received and studied many tantras along with their commentaries, I have become the model of a learned translator who knows the languages. Unperverted experiences, meaning pure experiences and realizations, have arisen in my being. So he's, assessing himself honestly, not being falsely modest, not being anything other than how it is. Now I'm returning to Tibet without obstacles. There is no happier day than today. So he's rejoicing in it. And Marpa then sang the first of 8 grand songs to the glorious Naropa. It was a song in the voice with the drone of a tambura. This is the song in which he offered his realization. And that's the one that we're going to look at. So we've got some idea of this is in the great feast with all these illustrious beings, and supreme amongst whom was Naropa. So I'm just going to read straight through it. Lord, authentic, precious Guru, because of the merit accumulated by your previous practice, you met the Nirmanakaya Tilopa in person. The suffering of existence, which is difficult to abandon, you scorned throughout your 12 trials. Through your practice of austerities, you saw the truth in an instant. I prostrate at your feet, Sri Jnana Siddhi. I, the translator, a novice from Tibet, through the karmic link of previous practice, met you, Mahapandita Naropa. I studied the Havadra Tantra, famed for its profundity. You gave me the essence, Mahamaya. I received the inner essence, Chakrasambhara. In general, I extracted the inner essence of the 4 orders of Tantra, as granted by the mother Subhagini, whose river of blessings is continuous. You transmitted the 4 Abhishekas to me. I gave birth to undefiled samadhi and established confidence in it in 7 days. The sun and moon, the life force and descent were locked in the home of still space. The experience of self-existing co-emergence, bliss, luminosity and non-thought dawned from my heart. The confusion of habitual sleep was realized as the nature of the path of luminosity. The movements of the mind, both grasping and fixation, dissolved into the simplicity of Dharmakaya. Outer appearance, this illusory wheel of confusion, was realized as unborn Mahamudra. In the fixation, this mind consciousness, like meeting an old friend, realized its true nature. Like a dream dreamt by a mute, an inexpressible experience arose. Like the ecstasy experienced by a maiden, an indescribable meaning was realized. Lord Naropa, you are very kind. Previously you gave me blessings and abhishekas. Please continue to accept me with your kindness. Okay, so let's have a look at that in a bit more detail. Lord, authentic, precious Guru, because of the merit accumulated by your previous practice, you met the Nirmanakaya Tilopa in person. Nirmanakaya is the physical incarnation, if you like, the body of the Buddha. So he's saying that Tilopa was the Buddha in person, in the worldly realm, in the physical person. And because of Naropa's virtue and practice, he was able to meet, and he saw Tilopa as a Buddha, not as some crazy person, which to ordinary eyes he might have appeared to be, but he saw him as the Buddha. He met him as the Buddha. So you met him, and the suffering of existence, the suffering of samsara, in other words, of worldly life, which is difficult to abandon. You know, if it wasn't difficult, we would all be enlightened, wouldn't we? We're stuck in it with all its temptations. Even though it's suffering, we still think that pleasures are going to give us all this pleasure, and we end up just getting stuck in the mud. But the suffering of existence, which is difficult to abandon, you scorned throughout your 12 trials. So you scorned samsara, you saw through it because, now you have to understand also that Naropa was even before he met Tilopa, he was the preeminent teacher, or professor, you could say, or of a great university, which is Nalanda. So he was very, very highly realized and highly accomplished, and hero worshipped and respected and, you know, revered. So he had all of this hero worship going on around him, and he was, you know, with that, you could say that maybe there was some pride there. It would be very difficult to remain completely free of pride in those kind of circumstances. But anyway, so because of that little bit of pride that he had, even though Tilopa knew that he would be a great disciple and then ultimately a great realized being, he had to put him through these trials, 12 of them. And they were very, very, very difficult trials. I mean, they demanded of Naropa such great faith, because you wouldn't willingly, for example, jump off the roof of a high building. That was just one of the things that Tilopa asked him to do. Tilopa didn't ask him to do this because he was being cruel and horrible to him. He knew that the only thing that was separating Naropa from realizing his Buddha nature was his pride. Which, you know, was kind of understandable to us, but it was an obstacle for him. So he had to put him through all these trials. And he made him do terrible things. He made him steal stuff and then suffer the consequences of having stolen things. You know, this stuff that to our eyes looked crazy, even criminal. So I'm not going to go through all the trials here. It's not written down here. I think I'd remember them off by heart, and it would take too long. But he did them all unwaveringly because he had such faith in the Tilopa. So even though, you know, you might bother him, well, yeah, of course he's a great teacher, but I don't think I'm going to do that, you know, and whatever it was. But he did it without question, 12 different trials. And through your practice of austerities, you saw the truth in an instant. I mean, the very last of the trials, or I don't know if it's actually one of the trials, but the thing that kind of switched him from being not entirely 100% enlightened to being 100% enlightened was that at the very last of them, Tilopa took off his sandal. You have to imagine, as a yogi, he's got a loincloth on, and, you know, he's probably not, to our eyes, the most hygienic. So he takes his sandal off and whacks him across the face with it, slaps him across the face, and in that instant, that was the final touch. All he needed was to realize his true nature, realize Buddhahood. So you saw the truth in an instant. I prostrate at your feet, Sri Jananasiddhi, Sri Lord of Wisdom, Master of Wisdom. I, the translator, a novice from Tibet, so he's being quite self-depreciating there, calling himself a novice. He's also on a very, very high level, don't forget, but in comparison to his teachers, he's putting himself down. Not down, he's just being realistic and humble. I, the translator and novice from Tibet, through the karmic link of previous practice, so I have done some previous practice and established this karmic link, I met you, Mahapandita Naropa, great Pandit Naropa. Then I studied the Havajra Tantra, famed for its profundity. You gave me the essence, Mahamaya. These are all practices. I received the inner essence, Chakra Sambhara. These are very high tantras, tantric practices. Kolo Demchok, this is in Tibetan. I received the inner essence, Chakra Sambhara. In general, I extracted the inner essence of the 4 orders of the Tantra. You know, this is like the very highest teachings, as granted by the mother Subhagini. So the mother Subhagini, she was a great teacher, a yogini, a teacher of Tilopa. So she was the teacher, teacher who taught Tilopa, and then Tilopa taught Naropa. So granted by the mother Subhagini, whose river of blessings is continuous. You transmitted the 4 abhishekas, the 4 empowerments to me. And I gave birth to undefiled samadhi, pure, undefiled samadhi, and established confidence in it in 7 days. Remember, he meditated without moving for 7 days. He was established in that. Not only did he reach that level, but he was well established in it. 7 days he didn't move, he didn't eat, he didn't do anything. He was just completely in the state of bliss. The sun and moon, the life force and descent were locked in the home of still space. So this refers to the internal energies, you know, sort of the central channels, the chakras, which are activated by these practices. So that's what that refers to. The experience of self-existing co-emergence. Remember? That's samsara, nirvana, inseparable. Seeing them not as one in a way, because something that is samsara, you see the nirvana in there as well at the same time. The one becomes the other. There is no difference in the end. One taste, they say. You know, there's no judgment of this is nice, that's not nice, this is good, this is bad. You've gone beyond polarities. Hard for us to understand because we're still relative. In the relative, this is good, this is bad. But when you've gone beyond that, then it's one taste. Bliss, luminosity, and non-thought dawned from my heart. I think that's very interesting because it talks about heart. This is where you feel, isn't it? You feel it's not just a question of intellectual understanding, it's experiencing bliss, luminosity, and non-thought dawned from my heart. The confusion of habitual sleep, our normal habitual sleep, how we normally sleep, was actually realized as the nature of the path of luminosity. So even in sleep, which is usually a very uncontrolled, you know, when we go to sleep, we just zonk out, we're unconscious, or maybe we have some weird dreams, you know, so that's normally a state of confusion or obscuration, it's dull. You know, you sort of, you're not sharp usually, are you? Yeah, and then you might be having some weird dreams. So this confusion of habitual, the ordinary sleep, was realized as the nature of the path of luminosity. So even in his sleep, was luminous, was realized. There's no difference between awake and asleep. That's how full it was. There was nothing beyond it. The nature of the path of luminosity, and that is one of the yogas of Naropa, is for sleep, the practice of sleep. The movements of the mind, both grasping and fixation, so the normal movements of grasping and fixation and judgment and that kind of thing, dissolved into the simplicity of Dharmakaya. So like our minds were full of judgment. This is nice, that's not nice. I like that person, I don't like that person. This is good to eat, that's bad to eat. We're all the time running after what we want, running away from what we don't want, and that's how we spend our lives. So none of that exists anymore. The movements of the mind, usually both grasping and fixation, dissolve into the simplicity of Dharmakaya. Oh, that sounds so good, doesn't it? To not have that judgmental mind, to be dissolved into the simplicity. Simple but not easy. The two are very different. The simplicity of Buddha mind, Buddha nature. Outer appearance, this illusory wheel of confusion, was realized as unborn Mahamudra, the highest teaching. So the one has become, you've seen through it all. Inner fixation, this mind consciousness, like meeting an old friend, was realized its own nature. So like, when we think our inner fixation, our inner world, our inner landscape of fixation and how we normally are in our mind, this consciousness, but realized its own nature. So the mind looking at the mind like meeting an old friend. Oh, that's how you are. That's who I am. That's what it is. Like meeting an old friend, realize its own nature. Like a dream dreamt by a mute, an inexpressible experience arose. That's such a beautiful metaphor. A dream dreamt by a mute, whatever the dream might be, the mute can't express it. It's inexpressible. Like the ecstasy experienced by a maiden, an indescribable meaning was realized. So all these things are not describable. Like that is not describable or expressible. Only it can have some little hint towards it. Because it's beyond words. This experience is beyond words. But this is being spoken by someone who has realized it. So you have some inkling. But that phrase, like meeting an old friend, it's very, very wonderful. Lord Naropa, you are very kind. Previously you gave me blessings and abhishekas, empowerments. Please continue to accept me with your kindness. We say, oh, you're so kind, you're very kind. It's like, it doesn't mean that much, but you get the feeling that after all he's explained how kind, how devoted he is, because Naropa has been so, so kind to him. You are very kind. So, when we have that kind of faith in our teachers, then that opens us to the blessings. It makes me think my guru, I've had many gurus, but my root guru is Akam Rinpoche, who was so, so kind. I have that feeling. I'm not comparing myself to Marpa, but it's that appreciation of someone who cares so much about you, and you're doesn't mean to say like a there kind of someone gives you what you want. No, but someone who cares, who deeply, deeply cares about you, and does what they can, not just you, but other beings as well, of course, but has that heart of a kindness towards you, and wants you to benefit you as much as you're able to receive. That kind of appreciation, that's the kind of kindness, and that's what the beginning of faith is, trusting that person, and then faith for appreciation for that kindness, when he says, Lord Naropa, you are very kind, it sounds like nothing on one level, but it's everything. So in response to that, Marpa offered his realization. That was Marpa offering his realization and thanks to Naropa. And so the Mahapandita Naropa placed his hand on top of Marpa's head and sang this song of oral instructions. So Naropa sang, it's quite a short song, but again it's full of meaning, of course, and he just placed his hand on Marpa's head and sang this song of oral instructions. You, Marpa, the translator from Tibet, do not make the 8 worldly dharmas the goal of your life. Do not create the bias of self and other, grasping and fixation. Do not slander friends or enemies. Do not distort the ways of others. Learning and contemplation are the torch that illumines the darkness. Do not be ambushed on the supreme path of liberation. Previously, we have been guru and disciple. Keep this with you in the future. Do not give this up. This precious jewel of your mind, do not throw it in the river like an idiot. Guard it carefully with your undistracted attention, and you will accomplish all needs, desires, and intentions. So, we'll just go through it a little bit again, but it's not got any kind of esoteric terms in it. It's fairly simply expressed. Maybe just the odd thing I just want to kind of explore a bit more. But I think what would be useful is if we think of, he's addressing Marpa the translator, but let's read it again, but with him addressing us. So, you, Marpa the translator from Tibet, and everybody sitting in this room right now, I interject. So let's think of it like that. Do not make the 8 worldly dharmas the goal of your life. We've talked about the 8 worldly dharmas before, but I will just go through them again. They're sort of in pairs, because there's ones that we think are good, and there's ones that we think are bad. And that's what we generally want. This, we don't want that. So one pair would be gain and loss. We want gain, we don't want loss. Both of them are worldly dharmas. It's just we throw that judgment on, that's what we want, that's what we don't want. So he's saying, you don't want to, any of them, they're all worldly, they're all meaningless. So forget about gain and loss. Fame, and the opposite would be kind of notoriety or ill repute. So, we think we go after fame, we'll become famous. Oh, but we don't want to have a bad reputation or be notorious. And there's praise and blame. So we like it when we get praised, we do not like it when we get blamed, especially if it's something we haven't even done. But even if we have done, we still don't like it. Happiness. You all want to be happy. Suffering or misery. We do not want to be miserable. So all of these things take up all our time. We want this, we don't want that. They are altogether the 8 worldly dharmas. So do not make them the goal of your life. Things will happen. You might have a preference for one or the other, but at least do not make them the goal of your life. Don't run after fame or praise or happiness. When it happens, it happens. And when the negative things happen, they happen. So try to keep an even keel, because they're all meaningless, ultimately. Do you think Naropa or these yogis would be swayed by any of this stuff? No, of course not. So do not make the 8 worldly dharmas the goal of your life. Do not create the bias of self and other. So that's, ultimately, there is no self. We can't yet quite grasp that, but at least we can try not to be selfish and see others as other, because ultimately we're all pretty much the same. We all have Buddha nature. So do not create the bias. It's bias. It's not, it's like if you treat people the same, whether they're kings or beggars, or however, you might judge people. If you treat people the same, you be kind to people if you can, not just people, but any kind of sentient beings. Not creating a bias. Doesn't mean to say you don't see differences, but you're not biased this way or that way. Grasping and fixation. Grasping this, fixating on something, my ideas, my this, my that, any kind of fixation. Do not slander friends or enemies. Well, there goes all the gossip, because it's usually one or the other, isn't it? Or we excuse it because it is somebody that we see as an enemy. Today we see them as an enemy, tomorrow we might see them as a friend, because there's no truth in it, so it's changeable. So do not slander, basically, friends or enemies. Do not distort the ways of others. Imagine if you'd have met, if we'd have met Tilopa in the marketplace and saw what he was up to. I suspect we would have had a distorted view, and that's, you can imagine if you see somebody behaving in a way like that, you would definitely have a judgment about that. So do not distort the ways of others, because you don't know for sure. Learning and contemplation are the torch that illumines the darkness. So now we know. Learning and contemplation. So I use that metaphor about being in a dark room. So it's not the light switch that's going to make the difference. It's the learning and contemplation and meditation. Learning, I think contemplation is a mixture of reflection and meditation. That's how I understand contemplation. Do not be ambushed on the supreme path of liberation. So you're on the path, you're going the right way, but who knows what's hiding in ambush? Could be pride, could be all sorts of things that can, unless you, in other words, keep watch. Just because you feel like you're on the right path, maybe you are, but you're not there yet, and anything can come up and just ambush you. By that I mean your own faults that you can re-emerge. So keep watch of yourself, of your own mind. Previously, we have been guru and disciple. So not only in this life, but in previous lives, we have had this relationship, this very precious relationship. Keep this with you in future. There'll be other lives to come as well. Do not give this up. This precious jewel of your mind, you've come to realize this precious jewel of your mind, don't throw it in the river like an idiot. Guard it carefully with undistracted attention. Pay attention. Be aware, and you will accomplish all needs, desires, and intentions, pure intentions. Naropa said many kind things in which Marpa greatly rejoiced. I think with those words, let's just sit with them for a little while, because we're taking them as if it's coming straight from Naropa to us. So just straighten up your posture. So we'll take those words as our guidance. And just let them sink in. So they don't just rest as an abstract or intellectual understanding, but really sink in to our being. So just to complete the narrative of this little bit, Naropa said many kind things in which Marpa greatly rejoiced. Marpa made a vow he would return to see Naropa, return back again to India, and then he left for Tibet. So that's just one of his songs, but this there's 8 of them, I think, in this chapter. So I think this chapter is so key, because the way it's such a direct kind of relationship between Tilopa, Naropa to Marpa, and Marpa through the teachings that have come to us, through Akko Rinpoche and who brought them to the West. So there's a very direct line. Of course, there's centuries in between, but the link is there, the line is still there, the lineage is still here. So how fortunate we are to have encountered that. And then, of course, we have to take that advice about don't be like an idiot and throw it in the river. This is all an introduction to our mind. So we should try to not be like idiots and waste it. And use it, the precious opportunity that we have. Okay, so we'll finish with the dedication prayer. So we can say it, if you turn over, so we've got the page with the wheel on the top and at the bottom. So we'll say it in English and then we'll say it in the Tibetan, chant it in the Tibetan. So in the English, through the wholesomeness of this practice, may all mental defilements be overcome, and may all beings be liberated from the ocean of samsara, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And we'll just chant the Tibetan. O sana tamche zikpani topne nepe janam pamchene jigana chi baladrukpai sipe sale doa show. So thank you for coming, and thank you to those listening wherever you are, and hopefully it's been of some use, and that you practice some of use these songs. So you have them online now as well. So even if you don't have the book, you can. The thing is, I feel that when we go through it together, it's just an introduction to it, and now it's like you have the tools to practice it. I think I've explained a few of the terms and things like that. So now it's up to you to really explore it, because there's only so much we can do in less than 2 hours. It's what is it, an hour and a half or something, Oh, we're enlightened. I think not. So it's you have some tools to practice with, but it's of course up to you. So I hope it goes well, and that we come back again in approximately a month's time and explore some more teachings. Thank you.